All right, let's do this. Peanut, if you're staying in the room, no talking. Hello, and welcome to the PhotoWork podcast, the talky and touchy-feely version of my book, PhotoWork, 40 Photographers on Process and Practice. I'm Sasha Wolf, as usual, joined by my friend and producer, the Oberon of the of the PhotoWork podcast universe, the king himself. Okay. Michael Chovan Dalton. I just was going to keep going, but I'll control. Yeah. Hello, Michael Chovan Dalton. How are you?
Oh, hello. Wow, we're reaching back with that one. Just had flashbacks to my high school reading
Shakespeare
Midsummer Night's Dream.
Yep.
Yes.
I was going to say, I was going to make myself, first of all, I was like, am I Puck or am I, Oberon was married to Titania.
Or Titania, maybe Titania. Right.
Bring in the pronunciation guide. She's no great shakes, but Puck is, Puck's got some issues. So I don't know. Yeah. I just decided we'll just throw you into the forest.
King of the fairies.
King of the fairies. And then I was also thinking, as I was starting to say the talking, touchy-feely version of my book, I was thinking, all of a sudden the word talkie to me reminded me of talkies. And I was thinking, what was the first talkie? I think it was the jazz singer, but don't hold me to it.
Yeah, I don't know.
I can't Google while I'm talking to you because I just can't.
Because we're live. We can't stop.
No, we need a third person. We need that just amorphous sort of associate producer who's on the line who I just shout off into the distance. Hey, what was the first?
I'm getting an update.
What was it? Oh man. How you doing?
Yes, I'm doing all right. Wrapping up the semester, and I have to say, it was a good one. I have students who are just so enthusiastic about photography, and what is better than that?
Nothing.
What could be better?
Wow, that is wonderful. I feel that way with clients a lot. I mean, obviously, I feel that way with the artists I work with, but I think I get that sort of more innocent, unadulterated, pure excitements from certain clients, and not all. But when I do, it is really fun because I feel that way a lot. I'm not jaded yet.
Yeah, no, exactly. I mean, I don't think I could teach if I wasn't optimistic and enthusiastic. Yeah. And wow, what would that class be like?
Oh, I don't know. I'm sure there are a lot of people, unfortunately, who are taking that class with a lot of, well, not to throw professors. Unnamed professors under the bus for no reason whatsoever. Why did I do that? That was so mean-spirited. I take it back. Oh, my God. I have to go sit in the corner. I've been misbehaving, by the way, since we started. So
that's right.
I really should go sit in the corner. Oh, wait, I sort of am in the corner.
Yeah, you probably are.
I can't get any more in the corner. I would be one with the plaster wall.
Does Oberon put Puck in the corner?
Oberon should put Puck in the corner. I can't remember exactly, but Oberon definitely should. And if you're Oberon and I'm Puck, then you definitely should put Puck in the corner. All right. On that insane note, ladies and gentlemen, we've started the podcast drunk. No, not really. It's 10 o'clock in the morning. Man, holy cow. So, all right, I'm going to turn this ship around. This is a great episode. I had a conversation with my friend, the photographer Curran Hatleberg, who is an artist that I've been a huge admirer of for many years. And also, he's just one of the loveliest people. He's just very warm, very big-hearted, and really honest. And I think it's a really beautiful conversation. I just want to say one thing. Curran is so sort of humble, and he's like the anti-braggart that when I was talking to him and I asked him to, sort of go over his journey, his bio, he left out some huge things. So I'm just going to quickly mention them here. One was that Curran was one of the artists in the 2019 Whitney Biennial. He had a very large group of images in that show, work acquired by the Whitney as well as many other museums. And also we spoke quite a lot on various episodes of the podcast about the show at ICP, But Still It Turns, that my artist Christine Potter was in, and it was Greg Halpern and Curran, Vanessa Winship, Ramel Ross, Richard Troy. Anyway, 8-9 artists in that wonderful group show that was going on last spring and summer. So I want to mention those things since he didn't. I also want to say that he has a new book coming out this spring, and everyone should pre-order that as soon as it is available for pre-order at TBW Books. So that's what I wanted to say. But good episode, right?
Absolutely. And also, speaking about enthusiasm and optimism in photography and someone who is not jaded, I mean, the way Curran talks about photography and his sense of wonderment and exploration, the way he talks about photographing people, it was just wonderful. Yeah. Absolutely.
All right. Well, because I sort of went on in bonkers land for so long, let's wrap it up, see if we can keep under the 1 hour mark. Michael, thank you for spending this morning with me. And if you don't mind, please take it away.
My pleasure. And here's your conversation with Curran Hatleberg.
Curran Hatleberg, welcome to the PhotoWork podcast. Thank you so much for spending time with me this afternoon.
Thanks for having me. I'm glad we finally found the time to do this. I feel like we've been talking about it for a while. So thank you. It's an honor to be here talking with you.
Cut that out.
Seriously.
So, Curran, gosh, so much to get into. You actually happen to have a show up. Is the show still up at Higher Pictures Generation?
Yeah, it's up. Let's see. I think until the 27th of this month. So a few more weeks.
Okay. I'm not sure when this episode will drop. It might be sort of right around then. But this is your probably, third exhibition?
Yep.
With some iteration of Higher Pictures?
Exactly. Yeah. Third time, which feels, it feels lucky to have this opportunity yet again to be showing it. I don't know what I consider to be one of the better photo galleries in the country. Definitely. So
yeah, amen, for sure.
Always humbled by those chances to share work.
Yep. The work that is up now is part of a larger project that will be published by TBW soon, right? It's coming out when, in the spring or?
Yeah, I guess this spring. We're going to print it at the beginning of December. So however long it takes to move across the ocean, I guess.
A while.
Yeah. So this spring probably makes sense. Yeah.
Okay, so basically going to be, I think, a really wonderful and important book to add to the two, I guess, you have out now as sort of monographs. But before we get into all that and your contribution to my book, PhotoWork, which is one of my favorite contributions, and I want to read some of your fantastic answers. Can you just give us a little rundown of your journey, your life journey?
Sure. Where would be a good place to begin?
Well, where were you born and where did you grow up?
I was born in Washington, D.C., and then grew up in the suburbs just outside. So most of my youth was in Bethesda, Maryland, which is just a stone's throw from D.C. Pretty quickly after getting through with high school, I kind of went as far as I could, I guess, to get free from the kind of confines of the East Coast suburban experience. So I ended up in Colorado at the University of Colorado in Boulder and had it kind of, up and down experience there where I failed out of school at some point. Took some time off, which was deeply beneficial in my mind. So took some time off, tried to figure some things out while I was taking that time off, and ultimately decided to finish up and get my degree. So I finished there with a BFA in painting before leaving the state. It was a tricky moment because I knew that I had to leave Colorado. I had to kind of leave behind some of the things that were kind of holding me back or keeping me under. And in order to do that, I had to leave. So I ended up back in Maryland, not knowing where else to go and being totally broke at the time. And I lived with my grandmother for a few years, worked different kinds of jobs. I was, I cut lawns. I worked as a bartender, so different jobs here and there. And then with all my free time, I started taking photographs. So towards the end of my time in Boulder, I was making all these paintings that were based on photographs that I was taking. And these weren't really done with any kind of artistic intention. It was more just this impulsive kind of diaristic record that I was attached to. So when I got back to Maryland, I continued to make these pictures, not knowing what they were for or where they'd end up, if anywhere. So they just became this pile of images that sort of tucked under the bed. And at some point, a friend, thank goodness, we all have these kind of people in our lives, hopefully, that encourage us to do something, even when it feels out of place or undeserving. So he sort of pushed me to apply to grad school just because he could recognize this kind of obsession that I couldn't put words to. So I applied to a couple different schools based on some cursory research that I had done, and Yale was one of them. And I didn't get into the other school that I applied to, and somehow, still to this day, it feels mysterious, but yeah, I ended up at Yale through that process.
So you wound up at the Yale MFA, the photo MFA program.
Yeah.
And how was that for you? What was that like, all of a sudden winding up at this storied sort of institution and program?
For me, it was essential. I think largely because it was the first time in my life that I really cared about something in a certain sense. Up until that point, I had not really found the thing that I needed to feel any kind of self-worth or drive. And so that was really a gift of the MFA program. It gave me this opportunity to focus in and care about something in a way that I hadn't in the past. So I think in a lot of ways I was extremely green. I had never, as an example, printed a color photograph or participated in a critique before I went to Yale. Even though I had gone to art school in my undergrad, we didn't really do critiques or anything like that. So it was all this kind of brand new world for me. And I think I benefited from not having the baggage of really knowing what it was all about or what its reputation was about. So for me, it was a really fruitful time.
Did you have any sort of, eureka moment? It's funny that I just said eureka because, we'll get to that. But did you have any sort of eureka moment, as it pertains to making photographs and being a photographer? I mean, was there a moment where you knew, I'm so passionate about this is what I want to do with the rest of my life? Or did it quietly sort of unfold?
It's a good question. I feel like in that interim period between undergrad and graduate school, I started to learn about photography through books of photography that I'd find at the library nearby or at the college library, which had a bigger reserve of photography books. And there was something about it that felt aligned with the way that I was already interested in living. In undergrad, whether it was in school or during time off, I was taking these kind of rootless trips around just kind of investigating and see what would happen. And I figured out that if you attached a camera to that process, it was somehow different and justified. So at some point, those two things clicked for me. And I guess that was sort of the first time that I thought, maybe this is a way forward or an interesting path that I can take. But it was so naive. I don't know. I didn't have any expectations about results from that process. Mm-hmm. It was more just the excitement of being engaged with that type of thinking, I guess.
And also, if I may tell you who you are, and also process, right? Because one of my favorite little tidbits in PhotoWork is the personal fact where you say, when I was a child, the only way my parents could get me to fall asleep was to put me in the car and drive around the block.
Yeah.
Maybe it was the sound of tires on cement or the rush of the wind pouring in that sedated me. Perhaps this is an origin story, why my work is still so much about driving.
Right.
I find that really beautiful. I'm not sure. I haven't been in therapy for many years, but if I was back in therapy, I would definitely tackle this, because every time I read that, it makes me feel very emotional. So it's like pushes a little button. But to me, there's something about that statement and the way you're putting together this comforting thing from childhood with the way you work as an artist now that is really moving. I'm doing some research right now on Susan Meiselas for something, and it's just staggering how much she talks about process. I mean, it's really incredible. It's been fascinating and wonderful to really find out. But I feel like for you that is really a thing, how you want to live your life and how that connects with making work. I mean, does that sound right?
Yeah. I feel like the process is the point, the experiences that bloom from the process of making photographs. That's the reason to do it. The exchanges that I have with people, the places that I am fortunate to end up, the learning experiences that occur through process are the point. And, the photographs are kind of the cherry on top. It's just the gift of what happens after. But for me, it's really about that process that keeps me kind of locked in and excited about photography.
It's clear from your work that, you are a deeply humane, caring person. And the sort of project that got the attention of a large part of our community was your book, your first book, Lost Coast. Mm-hmm. And I wonder if you could tell folks, and I'm sure you've talked about this a lot, but just give us a sense of, I'll read the little blurb, but then how you made this work. But in Lost Coast, Curran Hatleberg presents an episodic narrative about Eureka, California. Intimate portraits of town and people function like a collection of short stories, building to an understanding of place. The pictures live between extremes, between the grand and the granular, between the breathtaking natural landscape and the grim realities of industrial decline. There's more, but I'll just leave it there. But how did you wind up in California creating this project?
The reason I ended up in Eureka was for a teaching job. So I had been in New York City for, probably 5 years or so after grad school, something like that. And I was doing the adjunct hustle, kind of in and out of different programs based on the semester, and working at 2 or 3 or even 4 different schools at the same time. And it felt exhausting. And at some point, I realized that, I wasn't interested in making work about New York City. I wasn't interested in making work about the surrounding area of New York, at least at that time. And so a friend of mine, Kate Green from grad school, had suggested that I apply for this job. She had just actually had the job before I was able to get the job. But she was like, it seemed like a place that you might find to be of interest or exciting as a place to live, but also as a place to make work. And that was sort of new to me. I'd never worked in the sense of making pictures and also lived in the same place. So it felt like an exciting and sort of different opportunity to engage with photography. So again, I don't know how these things happen, but I was lucky enough to get the job, and that sort of kicked off my stay in Eureka.
Did you know you get there and you're like, do you feel immediately this is a place I'm going to want to make pictures? Do you feel that immediately, or do you come to it slowly, or, are you hunting and pecking, or you just have a feel? I mean, I love this work. This is when I was first introduced to you. I'm pretty sure it was Sasha Adensky, our mutual friend, who said to me, you have to see this guy's work. And then I went to the show at Higher Pictures. I bought a piece.
Yeah,
smart of
thank
me.
you.
And I love this body of work so much. I love all your work. I mean, really, truly, I'm one of my favorite artists. I've told you that before. So I'm curious, like, it feels, Lost Coast to me seems so unbelievably organic. Like, I just imagine, I know this is just ridiculous, but I imagine that there was like no struggle, because it just seems so like this work and you and this place and you, perfectly in sync at this time. But how true or not true is that?
It's untrue in the sense that making work is always a kind of struggle.
Mm-hmm.
It's not often very fluid. Sometimes it is. Once you figure out a certain rhythm of working that pertains to a particular place, or once you've met somebody who has keys to all the doors,
Yep.
But that takes a long time. There's so many dead ends and wrong turns and failures involved in the process of making something. It always feels, I'm sort of copying, I think, Robert Adams or something, but it always feels miraculous, when something works out, because it doesn't feel like it ever will. When you're in the trenches, and you're making your work, it doesn't ever feel like you're going to arrive at that place where something does work out. But I think part of the deal is that you just have to wait, you have to have a kind of blind faith that what you're doing is right, that you're following this kind of state of intuition that's only about guessing, and that there aren't any wrong answers. So just having a kind of trust and faith in that is essential. But yeah, there's countless wrong turns and dead ends and along the way.
At this point in your career, whatever, I am always unsure what that word means, but do you feel when you hit a wall, or when something doesn't feel like it's panning out, are you more comfortable now knowing, well, I mean, a lot of artists, you hear artists, particularly actors, talk about, imposter syndrome, and always thinking that the job they're doing is going to be their last job.
Oh, yeah.
Someone's going
I relate to that. I completely relate to that. I constantly feel that imposter thing when I'm out working. It's like, I've been in this, I thought this parking lot was like the key to something, and I've been here all afternoon and nothing's happened. And, you just have these vague intuitions about what you think you should be doing, but that doesn't mean that you're going to get some direct hit, that something's going to work out. So when you're faced with those kind of fruitless days over and over, or when it's raining for 3 days and you're sitting in your car, 10 hours a day, or whatever it is, there's constant questioning about like imposter syndrome, or what am I even doing? This doesn't feel like work. This feels like failure. So yeah, I think part of the challenge and part of the job is having commitment and trust that you just have to. Those are just stepping stones to get to that final thing.
Well, I'll read you what you wrote because it's really connected. So in the book, and the question, where would you say your style falls on a continuum between completely intuitive and intellectually formulated? You say, when I'm photographing, it's as if I'm looking for something that's missing, but I'm not sure what it is. As if I'm on the verge of something important that keeps eluding me. All my pictures originate from a curiosity, a desire to experience things and express that wonder. If there is any construct behind my work, it is getting in the car and driving.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, you go on. That's not the whole thing. I urge people to, reread all of Curran's answers in the book because they're really beautiful and really generous. But I love that because in a way, what you're saying, it is like just keep going, right? Like,
yeah,
and it's
that's all
interesting
there
coming
is.
back to driving, right? Because so driving, we see the ways in which driving is so sustaining to you.
Yeah, yeah.
In so many different layers of being an artist, the driving seems to be really to sustain you and bring you back to almost like a safe, the predictable part of things, I guess.
Sure. I mean, it's interesting too, because the driving is kind of like, it induces this kind of trance state or like place of pervasive awareness or thinking that is hard for me to access otherwise. So, there's a kind of tuning in that happens when I'm driving. Mm-hmm. It's almost like I turn the on switch up, so that I'm in a state of awareness, I guess. But the driving is just really the first, I guess, piece of the puzzle. Once I find a place that I want to photograph that has a kind of mystery and authority that I can't ignore, then it's time to really get to work, which is getting out and walking around and then waiting for something to happen.
You said earlier, about finding someone who would, my memory isn't good enough to quote you back, but said something about a person who then gets you access.
Sure.
So how does that work practically for you?
Like how do you
meet that person who then turns out to be someone who, I assume what you mean is someone who's introducing you to other people? I mean, you're going into places and you're making these really intimate pictures. So, I mean, I know you to be an incredibly warm and gentle soul. I hate having my picture taken. I'd probably say yes to you. But how do you develop those relationships?
Well, it's all based on a kind of mutual curiosity. I think all the pictures kind of originate from this moment of intimacy and vulnerability that we both have to partake in order for it to work. But in terms of meeting someone and sort of getting to the next steps of making the picture, there's no secret to how it happens. It's something that is just felt. Like you kind of walk around typically where people are going to be congregated or spending time outside, and I just walk up to someone and express interest in them. The camera is usually out at first just so that they know it's not some surprise later. So I kind of let them know nuts and bolts right off the bat, that I'm a photographer. I'm traveling around looking to spend time with someone, that I'm interested in them, and then, I'd love to take their picture and spend time with them. And that, putting it all kind of out on the table right away is a good way to cut to the chase, because, people will say no or yes immediately, and it just kind of develops from those points.
This is just something I'm preoccupied with in general. I've talked to Skutmat about this quite a bit. Does it ever nag at you at all that the people who you're photographing, a lot of them are not going to be, I don't want to make assumptions, but I would think a good percentage of the people you're photographing are not going to be really familiar with the language of fine art photography. And so they can't, well, not that they can't, but they might not be your audience. I mean, I don't want to sell people short, but I also want to just, it's something that nags at me in what I do, this sort of disconnect between the subjects and their familiarity with the visual language that, we're sort of seeped in. And so how can they also be a viewer of the work? I mean, do you ever think about that? I don't know if that just was so convoluted. I was just tripping over myself to not be offensive in any way, but...
No, it makes sense what you're saying. Yeah, sure. I definitely think about it. There's a lot of disconnect in terms of access for viewing art in general. So, yeah, it certainly crosses my mind. All I can say about that is that when I'm photographing someone, there has to be this kind of notion of a mutual relationship, and I have to communicate those talking points about, I'm a photographer, so I show in galleries, I make photography books, so there's a chance that you might be participating in that. Is that something how do you feel about that, And so those kind of questions are discussed. For what it's worth, a lot of the people that I spend time with, I will bring them back prints, and there's some kind of closing of the circle in a nice way by doing that. And then also it varies with people's interest in the pictures once they have them, which is kind of interesting. There's one photograph I took of it's a kind of a still life of these watermelon that are sort of covered in bees.
I know the picture really well.
They used that for their Christmas card. This was like a farmer, so it's like,
oh, fantastic.
There are these little things where the pictures live in a different way, I guess, than, outside of the book form or the gallery wall, that maybe has some meaning. It's a good question, though. That doesn't mean that they'll ever be, as an example, in New York seeing the show. You know what I mean? So there is complication there. That's for sure. Yeah.
I want to talk about the book you did with your partner, Cynthia Daignault, who's a painter, an incredible painter. It's really, tell Cynthia this. In getting ready to talk to you today, actually, I'd seen some of Cynthia's work, but I hadn't really done a deep dive, and I just felt like it because I spent so much time with the book you guys did together, Somewhere, Someone, which unfortunately for our listeners, I'm going to say all these great things about it, and it's long since sold out. I looked, I have copy number 353. Got in there. But man, she's amazing. It was so fun really getting to know her work.
Yeah, she's incredible. In my
God.
estimation, she made the better pictures in that book, I would say. Well,
I don't know about that, but it's a great book, and she's just such a phenomenally interesting and talented person. I read an interview with her that was just incredible. So maybe Cynthia will be my first painter.
That'd be amazing.
Maybe you're my first painter, but but well, let's talk about the book. I was going to hop to the newer work because I want to connect it to Lost Coast, and Somewhere Someone is a little bit of a, what's the word? It's I don't know. It's just very different, right? First of all, it's in black and white. You usually shoot in color. I don't know what camera you were using for.
We both used these point and shoot Contax cameras.
Yeah, so totally different because I think you usually shoot large format.
Yeah, I shoot medium format, the MoMA 7.
Wow, that's amazing that you medium format. No disrespect to medium format, but I didn't realize that. I have to say, I thought Lost Coast was like 4 or 5.
I'm not that. I don't have that level of patience or skill to operate those cameras. It's I don't know how people do it, honestly. I need to be more fluid and responsive. It's incredible that people know how to use those cameras in a way that's active.
So you're not shooting on a tripod?
No, never, pretty much.
Wow, your pictures are so sharp. I mean, for a lot of those group scenes, that's sort of amazing. I never get into tech talk, so I don't really want to do that now, but I have to say I'm just surprised.
Yeah, tripod, I don't know. It's just another one of those tools that you have to like fumble with when you're with somebody.
No,
you know what I mean? Like,
no, it's yes.
I'm really interested in the lightest kit, the least amount of gear as possible, because it's just one less distraction, I guess.
I have to go back and pay more attention to the aspect ratio. Yeah, it's so funny. I just absolutely imagine you, especially as I said, in these sort of group scenes, which I think you are the maestro of the group scene. It's like, I think of those group pictures that you did so well, particularly in Lost Coast, as they feel to me like stills from a movie set. They have this just, they're so beautifully composed. It's just, and the light, and I mean, yeah, so it's so interesting. I just absolutely assumed that you were on a tripod. Yeah, okay, I'll just get over my shock and move on. So tell us about the project that you did. I mean, I can read the description, but I think people are probably getting sick of me reading. So tell us about the project you did with Cynthia, because it's really so unique and wonderful.
Sure. Let's see where to begin. Cindy did this monumental giant piece of artwork, which comprised 360 paintings, where she circumnavigated the perimeter of the United States and stopped every, I'm going to get this wrong, maybe 25. Yeah, 25 miles or so, and made a painting there. So basically, in conjunction with that body of work, she proposed that we do a piece together in which we drove the middle of the country, which was absent from that bigger project. At the time, she was living in California and I was living in New York. And on my fall break, we did the trip. So it was only about 5 days, or it was 5 days. And what we did was we were kind of interested in this idea where if we drove the exact same roads, stayed at the exact same hotels, shot the exact same film and same cameras, and documented our trips, there's no way that our experiences would overlap. We'd see entirely different things along the way and make choices about what to photograph that was totally distinctly separate from the other person. So to organize it, we both, she left from LA, I left from New York, and we met in the geographic center of the lower 48, which is just kind of like a cornfield in Kansas. So we drove towards each other, met in the middle for a few hours, and then ended up at the place where the other person had started. And that's the project, basically.
And then how, you want to tell people how you organized it into book form, because it's really quite extraordinary.
Yeah, sure. I should also mention that its original presentation was done as slide projecting. So there were 2 slide projectors facing each other. One carousel had Cindy's pictures, one had mine, and the pictures projected at each other. So that was kind of the original presentation. But then we thought, this could lend itself well to a book. So we made a accordion fold book where one of our pictures are along the top and one of our pictures are along the bottom. And it's sort of the only point in which we're in the same place is the very middle, which represents that cornfield in Kansas.
It's the largest accordion fold in the, I mean,
yeah, it's pretty big.
I don't know how, it must be, I mean, is it like 100 feet or what?
I think it's, I wish it was. I think it's more like 30 or something. I don't even remember. But yeah, it's pretty cool when it's unfurled.
Yes, it's amazing. It's amazing. I'm an exaggerator. I can't help it. It's the New Yorker in me. Anyway, I love that book. I'm going to put in a pitch right now for this book being reprinted. I mean, there's something wonderful about a small run. You guys did 500, but
yeah.
I almost feel bad that so few people I know managed to get a copy because it's so special. So this is my my pitch right here for a reprint.
It was an interesting project. I had never really collaborated with that level of seriousness before. And it was such a beautiful process because, collaboration is built upon compromise, and you don't really get what you want. You have to work together to arrive at something in the middle. And so that was a really healthy exercise, in working on a project. It was interesting too, because on paper, so much of it made sense to me. You're moving around in the car until something catches you, catches your eye or catches your heart or whatever it is. And you get out and you start making pictures. The difference is that if it was me working in my normal way, that means, okay, I'm going to stay here for a few hours or a few weeks or a few months or whatever it is. And instead it was take the picture and keep going. So, because you had to be at a certain place that night to get up and go the next day, so that the timing was correct for the project. But it was an interesting departure from what was normal to me.
Did it freak you out, or
no, it was just exciting. Honestly, it was cool. Especially because I just had no idea how it was going to turn out, And one of the cool or interesting things about it is that most of the pictures default to a kind of banality or cliche, because there wasn't much time to really investigate. It was just like take the picture and go. So it was exciting to do that more shallow dive, I guess, rather than the deeper, more sustained, longer form kind of thing.
Speaking of longer form, the work that is up now at Higher Pictures Generation is part of a much larger body of work that you first showed part of a few years ago, I think.
Yep.
At Higher Pictures. And I'm really curious about I don't want to get too into, it's hard because, again, this is a podcast and people aren't seeing the things we're talking about, but the edit is really specific. You want to talk about what I'm talking about? Because I'm sure, even though we haven't talked about this yet, I'm sure you know where I'm going.
Yeah.
So, tell us about the edit and how you pulled these pictures out of this much larger body of work.
Sure. I guess I should start by saying what is not shown in the show, which is maybe just because it makes more sense to organize my mind that way. I feel like at its core, at its heart, the work that I am interested in making is kind of about understanding what family and community mean. So that means spending time with people, living with subjects, friends, collaborators, working with them, and really, really trying to get to this place of intimacy, of vulnerability, of reciprocity and care that all comes from the beginning of curiosity about someone else. So those deeper levels of understanding that happen when you spend time with somebody. So people are really at the center of what I'm interested in. And this last year felt so scooped out from that experience for me. It felt so emptied out of how I normally work and what I normally sort of fixate on. So the show is organized around pictures that are totally devoid of any human presence, I guess. There are some glimmers of people where they're kind of in the background, or you see like a foot or something like that. But I was kind of interested in what the work would feel like and what it would mean to sort of go against what feels very natural to me.
And what your viewers would expect, right?
Yeah.
What your audience would expect.
Yeah, I think so. And I have to, tip my hat to Kim Boris and everyone else at Higher Pictures who kind of pushed me to be vulnerable in that way and show work that wasn't, I don't want to say what I'm known for, but to show work that wasn't about something that in the past was so front and center.
it's startling. I mean, it was startling to me. And then it was a challenge. And, I think ultimately that winds up being a really positive experience, even if, it's not the current pictures that I love the most, if I'm being honest. But
yeah.
the challenge, I always say to people, and it's so funny because I just said this before you and I started recording today. We're recording in the late afternoon. I was with my assistant, Noah. Shout out to Noah, who I love so much. I was saying to him just this concept of how valuable it is to see shows, even if you don't love them, because there's so much to learn about how you feel about art when you have to grapple with something that you're having a harder time with, or you may not be connecting with as much. And I had that experience with this show, but not that extreme, because I love your work so much that it's really just a matter of whether it's going to be my favorite work or, it's not like I walked in and was like, I don't like this. I just, was definitely like, wow. And I wish that, and this goes back to what we were talking about earlier about the disconnect between who you're photographing and where, who then looks at the work. But in a way, it's like, I can hang in there and spend time until I start to figure it out, because I have the confidence to do that, because I have the enough literacy with this language. And I'm grateful to that. But yeah, I was just sort of thinking like, it would be so great if more people had that literacy and had that confidence, because I really think this show the complexity is so rewarding. It's just so rewarding, even if it doesn't have those sort of current greatest hits pictures in it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And in a way, I'd echo what you're saying, which is that I tend to think that the photographs I make that don't have people feel almost like B-sides, or it's just a different thing. Like I said, it's just not my central focus, I guess. So it felt uncomfortable and like an important experiment to try to build a show around pictures that just didn't have that aspect to them. It's interesting because when you look at the room, at least for me, it's a heavier tone. It felt darker, I guess.
Oh God, yeah, definitely.
And I don't know, maybe that's because I feel like pictures that have people, there's a natural kind of buoyancy or pulse that just exists in the picture that doesn't happen as easily without them there.
Well, that happens because of your relationship to them. It's not happening naturally. I mean, that's that incredible humanity and generosity that you have.
Well,
I could take a picture of someone being horrible to someone, and that's a picture of people.
Yeah.
I mean, we've seen thousands and thousands of pictures over the past forever. Okay, the history of the medium, but let's just say over the past few years, we've seen so many photographs that are just make you think, stop this train, I want to get off.
Sure. Yeah.
But those aren't the pictures you make. Now, just to be clear, your pictures of people are not puppy dogs and rainbows, but your generosity towards the human race is in your pictures. And so that's the buoyancy. It's coming from you.
Well, that means more to me than I mean, I guess that's always a challenge, is how do you translate that kind of everyday kind of transcendence that you can feel around people into the picture. And I guess it's not a given,
No, it's definitely, it's not a given. Let me ask you a couple of things as we sort of wind down. just want to gonna geek out a little bit here for a second. How did you tell me if this is just maybe off base, but it feels to me that the color palette in this body of, what is the name of this body of work, by the way?
At the moment, I know it sounds ridiculous, but we haven't located the exact title. So we're going to print in a couple weeks, and I've got a short list, so it's not like it's not like my pockets are empty, but we haven't pinpointed what it's going to be quite yet.
Okay.
Which is a little stressful, but
yeah, I'm sure
it'll all work out.
The color palette seems so different. There's these, the dominant color to me is red,
mm-hmm.
and it's not nearly as warm overall. There are exceptions, but look, I'm going to ask a question that I assume I know the answer to, but just for the sake of it, is that something that you are doing intentionally straight off the bat? Do you come to it, or is it just a happy accident?
You mean finding that particular kind of red color?
Well, just the color, shifting, making sure. It seems to me that the color palette is intentionally very different from Lost Coast. Now, obviously, Lost Coast has that California light, but
sure.
There's a lot of, very warm orangey tones in Lost Coast that do not exist in this body of work.
Yeah.
And then there's this repeating red that you see all the time. That's sort of jarring in a way.
Right. Yeah, I guess with this project, this forthcoming book and body of work, you kind of make those choices towards the end as you're sort of building towards this shared group of pictures. You decide on a kind of atmospheric tone or weight that you want to be present within the work. So part of one of the characters in the body of work is this kind of weather, this presence of weather, which is very much kind of like about to rain, heavy, deep summer, humid kind of feeling. And so
a lot of this work is in Louisiana.
Yeah, Louisiana,
yep.
Florida,
mm-hmm.
Virginia, all over the Southeast, although there are exceptions to that. Texas, there's some in Ohio. So it's not as much grounded by a geographic location, and it's more anchored by this kind of swelter and humidity
mm-hmm.
and density of air, I guess, that exists in summertime. So with that in mind, I think I work with this amazing printer to do all the printing for my books and shows. This guy named Hayward Hart, who works out of Los Angeles. And I feel like we've gotten to this collaborative place where he almost knows what I need more than I do, and it's this beautiful exchange of trial and error where we arrive at the final feeling together. And that's the color and the paper choice and all those little things that make a print what it's going to be. So really just trying to honor those deeper levels of atmospheric heaviness, I guess, is how we got to those color choices.
And you are, by the way, I'm a huge proponent of having collaborators in whatever ratio you want to, however much credit you want to give someone. But I think it's really important.
And for me, it would be totally disingenuous to say that, I'm doing this by myself. I think that's such a falsehood that's often far too perpetuated in the art world. This kind of like hero myth about an artist like out there on their own doing all the heavy lifting, and that just never sat well with me.
Yeah, no, I think it's silly, and it also just is a shame because if people follow that complete falsehood, they also are not going to make great work because, an example I've given before, but I love it because it's just so like pedestrian, is when I was making a film, I always imagined the main character. It was a short film. I always imagined there's no costume changes. The main character in this one outfit for like a few years. I imagined it as I was raising money to make the film and getting actors, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
And when I started working with this great costume designer, I said to her, okay, so I want Joe to be wearing this. And she just looked at me and she was like, oh, actually, I think Joe should be wearing this.
Right.
And I just looked at her and I thought about it and I was like, she's right. So it's like, that's the great thing about collaborating. And again, in whatever form, in whatever, but yeah.
But anyway. the whole process from start to finish is collaborative. It's
right.
There's
with
no
your subjects. Yeah.
Yeah. With the subjects, I mean, the work doesn't exist without their consent or mutual involvement, and I could never guess where someone might take me or who they might introduce me to or where we might end up. And those are all choices that we're kind of arriving at by dancing together, and fumbling our way through the process. There's so many pictures where I'm with someone and they say like, oh, well, let's go over here. That's where the better picture is, and, I'm a piece of this bigger puzzle. So it's the subjects and friends who help me make the pictures. It's, my gallerist, Kim, and everyone else at Hired Pictures who we have constant communication, talking through ideas and choices, and just having communication with people like them and friends and Cindy, of course. Nothing's done as solo effort, and then there's Hayward who makes the prints and the people who make the frames. Like, it's all done in concert. It's not as singular as people think.
One last question, save this one for last. Is this a satisfying life?
It's a great question. Some days it is. Some days it's there's wanting, But I'm trying to be happy with the artist that I am, and not the one that I want to be, in terms of the art making. And the rest of it is a totally different conversation, I guess. But yeah, I mean, what do I really have to complain about? I get to be engaged in this incredible tradition of art making. I get to work with people who I have no other reason to work with other than through photography. It's just such a beautiful excuse to meet so many talented, special people. I'm healthy. I don't know what else one can ask for.
Well, I don't know either. I think that sounds pretty good. I know you struggle with some of the same sort of, am I doing enough in the world type things, but we'll save that for another.
One little comment I should say about that is I'm doing a small run artist book that hopefully will be done by the end of the year. 200 copies, I think, and that will be all for charity. So just a little gesture.
Wow.
I don't know. After this last year, just taking stock of
that's beautiful.
How good things have been, when the world's been turned upside down. So
yep. Well,
more on that later.
You can put a copy or two aside for me. I'm in.
Okay, sounds good.
Send me an invoice. I'm in. All right, Curran, thank you so much for spending the afternoon with me. I love talking with you, and I wish you all the best. And send my hello to Cindy and tell her she may be on my list, and tell her it's painless. And,
I will. I definitely will. And thank you for the invitation. Honestly, I have such high respect for what you do. So it was my pleasure to talk.
Thank you so much. All right. Well, everyone, thanks for listening. And until next time, talk to you soon.
PhotoWork with Sasha Wolf is produced by me, Michael Chauvin-Dalton of Real Photo Show. The executive producer is Sasha Wolf, and our theme music is by J. Walter Hawks. You can hear PhotoWork on all your favorite podcast platforms. Please rate and review the show on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, or Spotify, and be sure to subscribe on any one of those services or wherever you listen to podcasts.